Good morning, Louise. Great to be in the studio. Great to be on the air, and looking forward to listening to what it is that you believe we should be focusing on this morning.
Well, I had spent easily from 8 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night watching the marathon.
Yeah.
The Boston Marathon. And I was very interested in that because there was a time many, many years ago when I raised my 5 children in the town of Hopkinton. And every time the marathon began, which was in Hopkinton, we drove down to the church parking lot, parked behind the church, and walked down the street a very short distance to watch the race begin. And then when it began, I would get in my car and take my kids down to Brookline, Newton, Wellesley, some of the other communities where we could watch people running in. And that was when there were hundreds of people running. But now, on Monday, there were 30,000 people running. 30,000, Pastor.
Right. That's a phenomenal number. And it's the marathon has come back with a bang from the explosion of a number of years ago. And I'm sure the security was extremely tight in preparation for this marathon.
Well, that's true, because I think you might be implying to the 10 years ago when some young people created a problem and set some bombs and shot some people, and a number of people died. And that was a very important situation for people, especially families, especially people who actually saw it happen. But then there was the other thing, and that was that the 30,000 people who were running, many of them were running for the purpose of raising funds to give to organizations that needed money, needed funds. So that was very important. The distance is still 26.2 miles from Hopkinton and Boston. And last year, I think, my new granddaughter-in-law actually ran the marathon, the whole distance. And her husband, my grandson, Willie, met her at the Boston area when she arrived there. So that was kind of important because that was family running the marathon last year. So there's always something important happening, always something special that we can report about. Some of it is sad and some of it is wonderful.
Well, I actually saw people with small little like 3-wheeled bicycles. And if I'm correct, they were that's part of the marathon, correct? With the bicycles?
It is part of the marathon because they are actually unable to walk. They arrived on wheelchairs. They came to the race on wheelchairs, and then they got into those 3-wheel special gadgets so that they could get themselves through the race.
So I saw all of that and I was very, very impressed. And then obviously there were stories in the newspaper 1 day before the marathon and after the marathon, interviewing a number of the people who were injured. And when the marathon was, when an explosion took place and really totally destroyed many people's lives, and they were telling the stories of people coming back with people who have lost their limbs. So you had the story of the marathon, but you had a story also that will always be a part of it, what happened 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And there was a woman who lost one of her legs. And I met her last year, and she was walking on a new limb. And I saw her a little bit, talked to her a little bit. And this year, she wanted to be at the race, but had some problem and wasn't able to physically arrive at the race for this marathon.
Well, I saw a story, Louise. The story was of a young man and a woman. He had lost his right leg, pretty far up on the leg, above the knee. He had lost that. And then the wife, she had lost both of her arms and both of her legs.
Wow.
And there was a picture of him carrying her and putting her inside of the automobile. And it was talking about they're still in love with each other and, they're getting through this. But there will probably be hundreds of people who have stories like that you and I will never be able to see or to know these people, but they're there, they're out there, and
yes,
and they're trying to recover.
Right. And one of the ways that they recover is by being at the race or running the race again under their new circumstances.
Right. So do you know what media binging is? Have you ever heard the term media binging?
I have, but I'm not really sure that I could describe it on the broadcast.
Okay, so we say that when a person is watching a movie, like a streaming movie, like a TV show that goes one broadcast after another one, after another one, after another one, you sit there all day and you watch all 24 episodes. That's media binging. And it sounds to me is that what you did with the marathon? Did you watch it all day?
That's exactly what I did. And that's the first time that I did that in my life, because as I said, when I had raised my children and I was living in Hopkinton, I think that I went to the race. I physically went to the race for a short beginning of the race. For about 23 years. And now Monday, I was really connected to the computer, and I watched it from 8 o'clock in the morning until noontime. And then when there was news, I stopped and got something to eat. Then I came back to the screen and I watched it a few more hours. And then I left the screen to get some water to drink. And then I came back and watched it again. I seemed to be connected to the marathon on Monday, 2 days ago.
Now, you said that you watched the marathon on your computer. You didn't say you watched it on TV. What's that all about?
Well, it was TV. It was TV.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying, don't tell me that you were also, in addition to binging, you were glued to your computer. Because once you go on a computer, you can put up about 10 different screens and watch the marathon from all those different perspectives of all those different cameras. But So that I didn't know that you were so captivated and so interested in the marathon. Didn't know that.
I didn't know that myself about myself this past Monday. This was something new for me when I watched what was going on,
Yeah.
when I saw the beginning and I saw the people who were going on the special three-wheel
Tricycles.
bicycles. Well, I don't know what they're actually called, but
Mhm.
they were wonderful. And people were some people were able to pull themselves all the way through the 26.2 miles.
Yeah, yeah.
26.2 miles. That was remarkable.
But Louise, for people who have been training for a year, there are people who have been training for over a year to get ready for this, that they were ready for all of that mileage. You and I couldn't sustain something like that. I would poop out after the first couple of feet, and
Oh,
you
me
would be
too.
pushing your what do you call that thing that you push now? Your stroller,
My walker.
your walker. You'd be pushing your walker. You'd be passing me because at least you had a little support. But it was very interesting. I was not as captivated as you were with it. I always like to tune in or find out the next day who won the
Mhm.
race, and it was some of the same people who had been winning, right? Won
Yes.
the race. And can you explain at all the cultural significance of the people who won the race? Was it because of the countries they're at? Was it because of how they worked out? Well, what were some of the contributing factors to certain
Well,
people winning?
some of the winners, the men who physically ran, they were from Africa.
Okay,
And they had run in previous years and won, and they came back and won again.
okay.
And then there were others who came from other countries. There were people from countries all over the world who actually ran in this marathon.
So, again, I haven't read the stories. I didn't read the stories about the marathon, but I would love to dig into, to in essence, find the news media where the winners came from, the countries, find the countries of the people who won the race, and then find their newspapers in their country and hear what their countrymen and women were saying about them. It would be totally different from what we are reading. And I want
Oh,
to
no.
know, I want to know if the countries that they came from, if part of their training in their own countries contributed to why they won.
Here's something I will let you borrow from me and read. And it is the Sunday Globe.
Okay.
And this is the section that had a lot of information about the marathon and about the people in it. This is it. Can you see it?
I can see it very well. And I didn't know that you still had the Boston Globe delivered to you.
I get the Sunday Globe. That's the only one that still gets delivered to me. It's the Sunday Globe.
Do they? It's delivered, so someone doesn't bring it to someone from the Globe brings it to you,
Yes, and
not a neighbor.
it comes into the building, and someone in my building brings it upstairs and puts it at my door.
Well, very good. Going back to the marathon, there are such a diversity of people from all different men, women running, and whoever wins, right? For example, the person who was the fastest person was running against everybody, men and women, right? It wasn't just the men running, it was men and women who were running. They're all competing with each other, correct?
No, they weren't actually. All the men ran one race.
Okay, so they did separate it. Okay.
All the women ran one race.
Okay, so we had a winner from the men's, women. Okay.
And the wheelchair people ran a race before them.
Now, do you know if there were any people who ran and like, let's say they only had one leg, but they had a prosthesis attached to
Yes, yes.
and they ran too?
They ran too, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And
And here's another section of the newspaper.
right, 26.2.
Yes. That's the mileage, and that is critically important for the marathon because there's a history going back to the 1700, I believe, that tells why the marathon was created and start in Hopkinton to Boston. It was because of the road that had to be carried to run on.
Well, again, I'm sure that you have spent a considerable amount of time reading up on the marathon that you know a lot about. You know, the papers also they had coverage on the two young men who prepared the bomb that went off, the two bombs that went off. And
Right.
they were telling the story of the older brother and telling the story of the brother who's still alive. And their getaway stopped the entire city of Boston. The police department, all the FBI, the federal, the state, the city, law enforcement community, they were aggressively trying to find both of them. And
Yes.
it was something that I have not seen before, other than what happened with Charles Stewart when he shot his wife and shot himself, and the police were aggressively looking for whomever did it. They were just violating a lot of the laws.
Right.
With the marathon, they stayed on this all day, and it showed how important videos are, because they were able to see the two brothers walking in the crowd, I believe, with something in their hands. They watched enough films to say there's something about those two, and they were able to narrow that down, right?
Mhm. Right.
And to go after them.
They also were ended up in Watertown,
In Watertown, yeah.
and one of the police officers was killed at MIT,
Yes, I remember
and
that.
the other police officer was wounded in Watertown and
Yeah.
died later
Yeah.
because he was suffering from pain and agony on that, having been shot by one of those guys. That was terrible. I remember that because I grew up in Alston, which wasn't too far away from Watertown.
Yeah. Louise, again, because it was 10 years ago, were you at all involved in this as it relates to working with the government to get help and support to people in need? Or were you not?
I was involved in helping some of the people who needed to have counseling after the bombing and the shooting, and the people were killed. There was a lot going on, and there were a large number of people who needed to be provided with counseling. And some of my psychology friends, as well as myself, were involved with that.
So you were doing this as an employee of the Department of Mental Health? You were still employed at that time?
I was, yes, I was employed, but I was I had put in more hours than I was being paid for.
Sure. I mean, and I'm sure that everybody wanted to extend
Oh, yes,
themselves.
yes.
So, I remember the days when we would have a concern in our state and in our city, and you used to go into they call it the bunker, where all
Uh-huh.
the state officials.
Underground.
Did they look at this bombing as something where they needed to get the governor and other people out of Boston into a more secure place? Or, because I remember seeing the mayor on the streets. I remember seeing him on the streets. I don't think he was in a secure place.
Right. There was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of people who felt unsafe.
Yep.
And there were a lot of people who were provided with counseling on the spot, right
Yeah.
there where they were.
Yeah. We actually came into the station and we were attempting to broadcast and to talk to people about what was going on. If it had happened, something like that happens in our city, we now have the technology to be able to bring up the media feeds and send it out on our links. And because we've done it before, many people have thanked us because they're on their jobs and they can't turn the TV on, but
Right.
they could watch it on our web pages, and they could listen to our coverage and call in. And we gave them an opportunity to talk about how they were feeling about what they were seeing.
Well, there was another situation too, and that is that last week, or when I talked about on the broadcast, when I talked about my birthday, and my son had invited so many people to his home that I was totally unaware of. But one of the people that was invited to my son's home on my birthday was one of these psychologists.
Oh, yes.
Kermit.
Yes.
It was Kermit. And he took some of his interns and himself and did some of the counseling on that day.
Yeah.
And there he was back so many years later celebrating my birthday.
Yeah, that was some time. That was some
Amazing, amazing.
So when the planes flew into the towers in New York City, that was a time when you were working for the Department of Mental Health, and were you with the governor when that happened, when they were trying to figure, or were you at Logan Airport?
I was at Logan Airport. I worked 9 15-hour days.
9?
Yes.
Wow.
I worked 9 15-hour days, and I was being paid 3.5 hours a week, but I just worked the number of hours that I considered required of me in order to do the appropriate counseling and reviewing of other individuals to allow them to come to Logan and provide counseling for family members who lost family at that bombing.
Yeah, that was tragic. And Eric, who's watching us, said, can you ask Louise to explain the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? What is the difference between the two, if you know? Psychologist?
Well, a psychologist has been trained in psychology and has a degree in psychology and works with folks providing counseling. A psychiatrist has all of that in addition to being a doctor and able to write prescriptions and provide prescriptions for people who need that in addition to counseling.
And
so
that's,
psychiatrists have two important trainings, and psychologists have one important training.
Right, right. So again, and so we started with the Boston Marathon. It went out without a hitch. When I say that, I'm sure things happen, but that they didn't rise to the point of being newsworthy or anything, because there's a lot in pulling something like this off. But as far as it being a event that we will remember, people were safe, people won, people lost, but it was again handled and managed very well by our state authorities and our city authorities. So I'm very proud that our city, it can't have every year that it comes back. They're coming back from what happened 10 years ago, and it's still growing, right? The numbers of runners is growing.
The number of runners has definitely grown, but in addition to that, the number of police had grown too.
Right.
Every single police officer was on duty last Monday.
Wow.
Every single police officer. That was not the case years back, but
Right.
that was the case on Monday.
You know, I wonder why we have to wait until something happens before we say we need all men and women on board, you know, wait until a crisis. You know, I sent a communication, an email to the police commissioner asking if he would assign Larry Ellison to do a active shooters training at our church.
Right.
And I haven't heard back from him, so I called him yesterday, and I still haven't heard back from him. But why do people have to wait until there is a crisis before they act? Because I would think that if somebody came to me and said, we need active shooters training for churches in Boston. We're a major urban city, and some of our churches are very visible in the community. Why do we have to wait until there's a problem at the church before we respond and say, let's do the preventative things? What is wrong with us?
Well, it's not wrong. It's just that is the condition under which police are assigned. And that's when something has actually taken place.
Yeah. Yeah. Eric said nobody lost the marathon. And I said some people won, some people lost. He said no one lost as long as they as long as their goals were met. They set a goal to run, they ran. So even if they were the last person that came in, they didn't lose, is what he's saying.
Right. Some of them walked the last few miles of the race.
Right.
Yes.
So, but you know, pushing back on Eric just a little bit. He doesn't like people to push back on him or challenge him. If he and I were going to run in the marathon, we both would have had to train for a year, and we would have run together, and I would have won that race because because first of all, I'm faster than he is. And so if two people decided to run the race together, and you know, as far as they're concerned, one of us is going to lose, one of us is going to win. I'm sure that there were some people who wagered and said, you know, let's run this together, and whoever wins wins. I mean, there are people who do that.
And some people who think they're going to win actually do not win.
Are you trying to say something about Eric and I?
I'm just saying that you can't make the assumption because Eric is younger than you are.
Yes.
And I know he has a problem with one of his legs, but
yes.
You are older, and you may want to win, but it may end up being different for both of you.
It may. Do you remember the story many years ago when there was a person running in the marathon, and they didn't start at Hopkinton, they just somewhere along the way jumped in, and I think I'm not sure if they won, but they jumped in and somebody saw it and reported that this person did not run all the way. Do you remember a story about that?
Yeah, and I think that he was told that he couldn't win. He couldn't
Yeah.
have won.
Right. So, I mean, I know that that's why the police presence along the entire way is
Mhm.
important, right?
Yeah,
And the police presence is important because there are people who are handing others water. I probably wouldn't take the water. If I don't know you, even though I'm running and I'm thirsty, I know that people are handing out water and trying to be supportive along the entire trip. It rained on marathon day, didn't it?
it did rain, but the people who collected the water had the water with the container had their name on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a person who went to the store and said, "I'm gonna pass out water." It was an official.
No, it was water that had the name of the runner who asked for it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
How do you know? How do you know that? I don't know that. How do you
Because
know that?
I was watching everything that was going on for a long time.
Were there any children that ran in the race? Because years
No,
ago,
they had to be legally 18 years and
18.
older.
Okay, because there was a father who put his baby in the carriage and pushed the carriage in the race. Do you recall that at all? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, but that's probably one of those that doesn't count.
And it, but well, yeah, well, so for example, when we were talking about the tricycles, the three wheel bikes that now are they at the starting line and they start with everybody else?
Yeah, they start for themselves. This is when all of those tricycles start at the same time in the same location.
Okay, so that's once the main runners have already left the starting point, correct?
No, they start before the main runners.
Okay, because because that could be confusing and dangerous if they all started at the same time. That couldn't happen. And
Right.
and if
Yeah.
the runners started first, those people on those tricycles could catch them. So you're saying they go first, and then
Right.
the actual runners go after that. Yeah,
Yes.
that would make a lot of sense. You're really into this,
Yes.
Sister
Yes.
Louise.
Well, as I said, I used to live in Hopkinton, and I raised my 5 children in Hopkinton.
Mhm.
And I have a picture hanging on my wall in my
Okay.
hallway that has hundreds of people at the beginning of the race. I don't know, I can't really remember the year it was, but I was physically in that picture as well.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So you have so much of Boston's history in your mind and in your thinking, and not just to friends, but you. That's why I think this broadcast is important for you and for
Mhm.
important for a lot of us because every time you come on the air, you speak history, you speak historically, you speak about the present, but you've got a lot in your past that needs to come out, and it comes
Mhm.
out every time we do something like this. And you are very accurate. You're usually right on a lot of the things that you say. So I've got to be careful trying to check you or challenge you at all.
Well, I don't mind the challenge, but because I was born in Boston,
Hmm.
I was born in St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Brighton, which is part of Boston. And I was raised in Allston, which is also part of Boston. And so Boston to me has always been where I started my life.
Right. Well, my mother actually worked at the St. Elizabeth's Hospital for years,
Oh, yeah,
and
great.
she worked in the whole data section
Hmm.
until she finally decided she was going to move and go to Virginia for the rest of her life. So that hospital will forever be a hospital that I respect and remember because of how they treated my mother. When
Right.
she went from cleaning houses in the suburbs to becoming a technician at St. Elizabeth's Hospital.
Oh, I'm
So
sure that you're proud of your mother.
very, very proud of her. Very proud of her. You should see my sister's posting all the time on Facebook, her photos, her things she's done. So the family loved Doris Wall. So tell me, the end of the marathon, when it was over, did you know some of the names of the people who were running, the people that either friends of yours or associates or the ones that win almost every year? Did you know any of their names? Were you
No,
looking?
I did not. I did not. I heard a few of the names of those runners from Africa. I remember the names from previous years, but I didn't physically know them.
And when we talk about Africa, we got to be careful with this question to you. Do you know of any of the reasons why the Africans have done so well in marathons around the country? Because they come here to run.
Well, they run well in a variety of places and variety of countries, in addition to Boston.
Mhm. So if for them it's like a lifestyle. This is what they
Yes,
do, and there are
yes,
always there are marathons all over the country. There are races all over the country. So they're always in preparation mode, is what you're saying.
yes, yes.
Versus somebody like me who just jumps in once in his life and does it.
Well, where were you born?
I was born in Roxbury.
That's Boston.
Yes, yeah, but I have never set a goal to run in a marathon, never set that goal. The only thing close to something like that for me has been uh, having a camp in New Hampshire where we went for years
Uh-huh.
and climbing what we call it's called Mount Major. I've been up Mount Washington once,
Mm-hmm.
but I went up via an automobile and came down in the automobile.
Ah,
But we used to climb Mount Major with a large group of young people, 30, 40 young people went up the mountain with us, and we did it every year. And I took pictures. I had photos of the Mount Washington, and
mm-hmm.
I actually wanted to climb it one more time. I was thinking of it 2 years ago to climb it, and then I thought that maybe last summer I would climb it because that would be the last time I think that I could make it to the top and get down. And I started thinking in terms of what would happen if I couldn't make it down or if I couldn't make it to the top. And I called 911 that sometimes people have to pay for their own rescue.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Well, that might be true under certain circumstances, but I don't know of people having to pay for help.
I think
I do know of people calling 911 and getting help.
I think it's when they say to people, you should not be climbing at this time. There's no climbing, but
Mhm,
you still do it. Or you do it by yourself. You
right,
do something that you shouldn't have done, and
right.
now other rescuers have to give up their time and risk their lives to save you. Some of those people have had obligations. I don't know what the full obligation would be, but I said to myself, I don't think I should be climbing a mountain with my condition,
Yeah.
and I do not want to be financially responsible if they say that somebody your age or your condition should not be climbing. But there are people age 74 and 80 who still do
Well, there
this.
was a woman that got stopped who ran on Monday. And
Okay,
she said she was 75 years old and she
okay.
had run 16 years in a row, but at the marathon.
And they didn't want her to run?
Oh, no, she was running.
Wow.
And she just made the comment to the journalist, and she kept going.
Now, see, now I find that, but again, that person had to be in tip-top condition to do
Yes,
something
she
like that,
was
you
in
think?
good shape. Yes.
And I'm not in that kind of shape at this time in my life. I used to be, but I'm not there now. So was there
Well,
any, go ahead.
as you know, and you have mentioned, I walk outside my unit where I live with a walker, and I walk with a smaller walker inside my unit to make sure that I don't fall down.
Right, right,
And
right,
that's what's going on with me now.
right. No, I would not have invited you to the marathon to run with me with your little walker. I may have said, why don't you come down and watch me as I run.
Yes, that would have been interesting, and I would have taken pictures.
You would have taken pictures.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
there are stories that I am going to read. I'm looking them up now of why the Africans are doing so well. What makes East Africans so good at distance running? That's something that I'm going to read because I need to understand this.
Yes, go ahead.
Now, Eric is actually working today, but fortunately, he's able to get on his phone and watch us. He's been watching all morning and commenting on a couple of the broadcasts. So we appreciate the fact that he knows where to go, and he knows when mental health in your neighborhood is on.
Yes, he sure does.
I think the last time that we were on together, Eric was in the studio and he was sending me texts. And I was trying to say, Eric, stop sending me texts and come on with Louise and I. He didn't want to do that. He just wanted to send texts. So I said to him, I'm going to stop reading your texts. I'm not going to look at them because you should be on. And he had a lot of good thoughts last week
But
when
he
we were
did
talking.
he did allow himself to be seen on my broadcast for a few minutes.
Oh, that's right. We put him on for a few minutes, but
Yes,
he
you
didn't say
did show
anything.
him because he was right there in the studio with you.
So let me just go back to the marathon and to the young man that is in federal custody, the younger brother. Um, did the federal government say that he was going to be executed? Has he been fighting execution?
That was supposed to be an execution originally,
Okay,
and he was placed in a prison outside of Massachusetts,
okay.
which ended up keeping him alive now for 10 years.
So, but is the ruling that he's to be executed still there? That hasn't been removed. That hasn't. The
It
court
has not
hasn't.
been, it has not been removed.
So the federal court still does the executions.
Yeah,
Federal
I'm not sure personally that it's necessary to kill him after 10 years.
Hmm.
I
So,
would
yeah,
think that he should be in prison for the rest of his life.
right, right. There have been many stories about him and about his temperament and
Mhm.
about and there have been photos taken of him when he has been not giving the finger, but acting in a way that he doesn't appreciate the fact that he's still alive. And again, I don't understand how he thinks. He may be twisted. He may be depressed in a whole different psychological state than he was prior to this happening. And I know that he had 2 or 3 friends who were trying to help him to hide the evidence. And those young people, the feds were able to track them, I believe arrest them. And they may have had plea deals, but one of them was trying to hide his computer. They knew that he was involved. I don't know if they knew beforehand, but afterwards they were trying to help out their friend, and all of them got in trouble with the law. Do you remember that?
No, I don't, because I wasn't aware of his friends.
I think there were actually students at the same college that he was attending, and they regretted what they did. They didn't understand the implications of what they did, but I'm sure they understand now, because that could ruin a young person's life, academically, job-wise. It just could ruin a person's life. And I'm surprised, and it may be in that marathon book that you showed me. There should be a continuation of the stories of what happened to the two brothers, and also stories of what happened to the three that tried, because that's a part of the marathon history in our city that will forever be a part of the history.
I know, and it was very obvious that neither of these two brothers were mentioned by name or activity at the marathon.
Right, right. Well, thank God that it went well, and to the best of my knowledge, there were no emergencies that rose to the point of the press needing to cover it. But I am sure that Boston was filled up, the hotels were filled, not only with the marathon runners and their family members, but was filled with news media from all over the globe, Louise. We're here in Boston.
And there was a party after the marathon in Boston that some of them attended, and then there was a party the next day as well. So there's been a lot going on for a lot of people from all over the world, as you mentioned. That
who was hosting those parties?
Who knows? I don't really know. I haven't really been able to read everything in the section of the Globe that I saved. I haven't been able to do it yet.
For you, the 26.2 miles, how long does that take you to drive from Hopkinton to Boston?
Oh, wow. Well, that depends on
The time?
whether or not the road is open. In other words, there are not people running in it. I would say a couple of hours.
A couple of hours.
Yeah.
So how long did the entire marathon last? Not last, because it lasts until the last runner comes in. How long did it take for the person who won? Do you have any idea how long that takes?
Yes, that's in this section of the Globe. I would have to read it.
That would be interesting to know how long it took. But let me go back to what you said and what Eric was saying about there are no losers. How long, if you know, how long do they keep the police presence and the officials there until the last person comes in? Or does the last person come in and everyone's gone, everything's taken down?
Well, sometimes they close the race, open the road, and people are still running in.
How do they do that? Do they have to, the people now have to run on the breakdown lane?
They're pretty much running on one side. Yes. And that's happened year after year after year.
But and there's no police behind them controlling the traffic at all?
Not really, because the police would have spent more time with larger numbers of runners than one or two people.
And I would assume, like the emergency trucks, the water trucks, and all that is probably gone.
They're walking, and sometimes people who are still watching will pass them some water to drink. They will ask them if they need any help.
Louise, there are some of these major events that Boston Black News should be covering. It's just that we just don't have enough bodies to send people out to cover these stories.
I know, but the marathon is an incredible history, and now that there are 30,000 people registered to run, I think that this is something that Boston Black News should do something about.
How many
Maybe
people
you
did
could
say?
do just the Boston part, just
Right.
the arrival.
Right. How many people did you say did you say how many were running? Did you give
30,000.
Louise, that's a
They
lot
were
of
registered
people.
30,000.
Oh, that's the last one. Can a person who has not officially, as you said, officially registered, still get in that line and run?
No, they shouldn't run in the line, but they might be able to run the race when all of the helpers and police and motorcycle officers and all those things are gone.
They can just get on the side of the highway, you mean, because they
Yeah,
can't get on the
start
highway.
running. Yeah, a
Because
couple of,
the original race, the start is on the highway. Everything is blocked. No cars are running.
no cars are running, no cars are allowed. Yes,
That's a major feat for
it
people
is.
who need to get out of Hopkinton. They got to find another way, and I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, well, there's another road. There's a highway,
That they can go.
Mass Turnpike.
That's how they go.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's how
so
I would go.
even if you did the Mass Turnpike, it would still be 2 hours from Hopkinton.
Well, it would take a while to travel from where I was living to where the Mass Turnpike begins. So it might take less time. It might be more like an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes.
Karen was on her way to the vineyard for the weekend with my daughter Owari. And so we drove and arrived in enough time, but we could not get to the ferry because all the roads were blocked.
Right.
Because they were run, there was a race being run. And so we had to drive to another location, and Ozzy Owari took out the wheelchair. Karen sat in the wheelchair, and she had to wheel her it was a long distance from where the people were running. She had to wheel Karen all the way down a hill, probably up another hill, to get to the ferry on time to be able to get across. That, the time when Karen was in the wheelchairs, at the beginning, we didn't know how to plan for timing and getting,
Right.
what access way we had. After about a year of this, we became more fluent. We understood what we needed to do and where we needed to go and how we needed to have access. That all takes time. You have to learn that.
Right.
So I take my hats off to all the logistics people. You have 1 minute and 36 seconds to go. You have again, Louise, talk through your entire broadcast. 1 minute and 36 seconds.
Well, I appreciate the amount of time that you have talked with me on the broadcast, because that has been important. It's always important when I'm talking about something I know, and you talk about the question that you have about what I'm talking about, makes it much more interesting, I believe, for people who are listening to this broadcast. So I appreciate the fact that you are co-hosting on a regular basis, Pastor Bruce. You're good.
Well, I was trained by the best, and Louise, you're one of the trainers.
Well, you also have created the marathon, not the marathon, but you have created the studio and everything at the church that relates to the broadcasting system. You created it.
Well, I have been blessed to figure the technology out. I don't know where it came from, other than God guided me through the preparation of all of this. But I'm hoping that God will continue to give us favor and allow us to continue